Okay, so yes, we're here for the Gardiner Dairy Foundation Community Grants. And I'm Danielle Griffin, and my colleague Sarah Collier from the Gardiner Dairy Foundation is here today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're all coming from, and it's lovely for you all coming from these agricultural areas across Victoria. We pay our respect to elders past and present, and to anyone in the room of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage. Look, today, as I said, we'll talk to you about Gardiner Dairy Foundation and what they're all about, and a little bit about FRRR as well, because it's important to understand that, you know, this is a really great grant because it's dedicated to your community, so you've really got an edge. But there are a number of other programs that FRRR offers, and if you're not aware of them, put us on your radar in regards to that. We'll talk to you about the specifics of the actual grant program itself and what we're looking for or looking to fund, and then talk about the application process and some of the resources that we can present for you. So Sarah, I'll hand over to you.
Hello again. So Gardiner heavily invests in emerging leaders, young people, rural communities. So it's all about enriching dairy communities, helping young people gain a foothold in the industry. We do that through research and development, community development and people investment, and industry engagement and strategic support. So that includes the community grants, obviously. We give out tertiary scholarships. We fund study tours. We fund projects with Monash. It's called Mighty. It's an industry teams initiative, it's called, and it enables students to undertake projects in the industry. So they go out, say, Fonterra, and do a project with the team there. So they get given a task and then they can sort of go out and work in the real world, I guess you could call it. We work with Marcus Oldham. We fund a few places there every year for the leadership course. We fund Dairy Bio and Dairy Feed Base in terms of research and development. And we hold a Dairy Leaders Lunch each year. So that's sort of more the industry engagement side of things for the lunch. And then there's just smaller projects. So if someone, say, has a great idea for a smaller project, they're more than welcome to approach us. And then if there's a good reasoning and we think it's worthwhile and it is supporting the dairy community, then yeah, usually we sort of have that extra funding available as well. And Gardiner invests about $6 million each year in all their funds, scholarships, projects. So yeah, there's a nice little cushion there. But yeah, any questions about Gardiner? I think that's sort of Gardiner in a nutshell.
I'll just say, I don't know if people know, but the Gardiner story is that when the Victorian, or when the milk industry was deregulated back in, I think, the late 90s, the government went to sell off all its brand assets, which included Rev and those names that they created to manage that regulated industry. And they received a significant amount of money, far bigger than they thought that they would get. And so what this provided was, some really enterprising people in the dairy industry said, we don't want you to take that and just put it into general, government things. We want to have that funding and have it to sustain the dairy industry for the future. So basically they have a corpus of 62 million, which they then, have invested, which then allows them to put that $6 million that Sarah just spoke about back into the industry to make sure it's a strong and thriving industry. And I suppose then also they're really recognising strongly that the communities where the people who live and work in the industry are critical to actually a thriving industry. So these projects aren't, they don't have to be about dairy. You don't have to have a relationship with dairy. There does have to be, a local community that probably has some kind of level of engagement with the dairy industry or a history of attachment there. But we're not expecting projects that are specifically regarding the dairy industry. So just showing you too, this is a lovely photo of, we typically have a grant ceremony every year after the grants are awarded, and this one was held in Melbourne, just really celebrating, you know, bringing those people together and networking, I suppose, and just really, you know, sharing each other's stories so that we get a real recognition that these are dairying communities. There's a heritage and a history there attached to this industry, and you know, we're making sure that those communities are thriving. FRRR, you may or may not know that much about us, but we are the only national foundation that's specifically focused on supporting remote, rural and regional areas with regards to their social and economic strengths. So our programs don't fund any metro organisations because we recognise that there's not as much opportunity for funding in smaller communities, and really specifically too, we are looking at those communities that are less than 15,000. That's not a priority in this program. We fund projects in Warrnambool, you know, and larger centres, because we recognise also that, you know, people are coming into those communities from smaller communities, and that's where they may be accessing particular services. So there's no discrimination there, but we're very interested in those grassroots projects that are really community and locally led. As I said, this is a great program for people that are based in these communities because it's dedicated and it's really looking to you. But it's also really good to understand that FRRR also runs an annual back to school program. So if you work in social services, you might want to see, and you have any engagement with schools, you might want to have a look at that program that provides $50 vouchers to, you know, vulnerable children every year. Additionally, we have a Strengthening Rural Communities grant program that is open quarterly with $10,000 grants, you know, up to $10,000 available every time, and then twice a year those grants are open to 25,000. So just important to put those on your radar, and at the end we'll give you a bit of a link to sign up and get our newsletter, because, you know, you may be doing a part of a project here, but you may have a bigger vision, and we're always really interested in understanding what you might leverage next after you do a project. So really encourage you to, you know, sign up and be a part of the FRRR community. But we'll talk now about the Gardiner Dairy Foundation. There is $120,000 in grant funds available, and those grants are up to $5,000. When we say up to $5,000, we award projects from, I think the smallest one has been maybe $500, up to the full amount of $5,000. Important to understand too, you can have a bigger project that this is a part of. So if you've got something that's bigger, that's $20,000, and you might have some funding from the local council, or you may have fundraised or anything else, it's quite okay to apply for this grant funding to contribute and leverage and make that project possible. So they don't have to be discrete grants that are only using this funding. We really want to understand how organisations can really take this money and invest it in ways that make sense and really benefits their community. The grants close on the 16th of March, so you've still got a full month to apply. And look, we announce in late June. So for grant making, that's relatively a quick turnaround. So we do hope that actually supports you as well. Any projects have to happen after that date, so it's always important to understand that. So what can we fund? We really can fund a range of community projects. You know, we're looking to make sure your organisations are able to deliver their services, you know, really well. We want to support your organisation and your employees and your volunteers. Digital connection and capability, we know, is something that's really critical in a lot of communities. We also, you know, are interested in how we can make you stronger socially or economically, and that could be investing in youth programs or programs for people aging or people that just are more vulnerable in your community, or economically, it could be looking at those events, you know, that bring people into your community and increase the funding there, or other projects that may have a bigger impact on the economic viability of your community. I think a great example sometimes is, you know, if you're looking to do some kind of thing that tells the history of your town or improves the things that tell their stories, which can often attract people and to get them to stay a bit longer, but also that actually invests in your community itself. Environmental sustainability is another one that we see more and more often. The inclusion, you know, making sure they're broad community projects that actually celebrate the breadth of people that are in your community, and things as simple as education and training, health and social wellbeing. So pretty much everything can fit under this umbrella. Just a few really good examples here, and just to let you know that I will share this presentation with you. So, you know, it's easy for you to go back and have a look at it. We supported Manigum Community House, which is in Foster. They've probably received 3 or 4 grants over the last, you know, 6 or 7 years. And in this one, you know, they had a year 2. So once again, if it's a second year of a program, it doesn't have to be a new program. But it was an innovation on their existing program in regards to creating pop-up support for the youth in their community. So a really great project. The grant funds went to supporting the project worker. So unlike a lot of programs, we will support salaries that are related to the project that's being delivered. And, you know, this has a broad community benefit. We know that if we can support young people, that strengthens the community overall. Health, wellbeing and social strength. This was supporting the Rail Trail Committee in regards to establishing their fitness circuit near their railway station and their community hub. And as you can see, these funds were only really probably 4% of the total cost of the project. So, as I said, we're very open to, you know, supporting larger projects. This is a project from Carragulac and District Kindergarten, where they were doing local excursions. They were engaged with local Indigenous people. The funding paid for the materials and a local artist to develop the mural with children that actually brought the stories from their local excursions back into their kindergarten for everyone to share. It was really nice too that, you know, while this was for the children there, that's facility is used for birthday parties and mothers groups and other school activities. So we are always looking to see how broad the community benefit might be in what's coming through. As you can see, a range. We've got the environment there with the community garden at Camperdown. Growing Together Lightly, that was another one that was supporting local growers. So once again, there's a bit of an economic and a social benefit there. Very simple, the Sun Safe Shade for Oxley Primary School. And then, you know, many years ago, just as a program to increase mental health first aid access to training in that area. So once again, I think it's a big umbrella. Eligibility. We are fortunate here that you don't have to be a charity to apply to FRRR. You have to be a not-for-profit. So these projects have to be charitable and not for private or commercial gain or individual gain. So we don't do scholarships for individuals because we are looking at that broader community benefit. So you must have an ABN or be incorporated. Obviously located in a dairy community. So we appreciate that, you know, the dairy community and the dairy industry has shifted a little bit over the last probably, you know, 5 to 10 years. But we see these as really the critical critical geographic spaces. We don't specify particular LGAs because we know sometimes you might be an LGA that's not necessarily seen as a dairy community, but you're actually kind of on the perimeter or the fringe there. So that priority is given to populations of 15,000 or fewer is actually incorrect. So I do apologise for that. As I said before, we do support projects in the larger areas in these communities, but we're always trying to understand, you know, how broad that benefit is for really supporting some of the surrounding areas as well. Things that we cannot fund. So when you looked at what we were funding, including wages and those kind of things, we're not funding you to keep the lights on. You know, wages, rent, electricity for the people that are at your organisation doing business as usual. But we'll fund projects, you know, anything in your project. And that may be that you are extending hours, and you may have a component that is the cost of that additional electricity or rent or something of a facility that's specific to that project that can be considered. Once again, project workers or people, consultants, all that need to be brought in for projects, we will consider their wages as well as a charitable fundable item. So what we cannot fund though, prizes, gift, trophies or awards. If you are running an event and you want to do that kind of thing, we will kind of separate that out and say, what practical items do you need? Do you need a stage? Do you need mics? Do you need portaloos? And we would suggest that you look for those things like prizes, gifts, trophies or awards through a sponsorship. As I said, we announced this at the end of June, so projects have to be happening in that next July period, and in that 12-month period from July 2023 to June 2024. We cannot fund sporting activities. Now, that doesn't mean we don't fund sports organisations, because we recognise in smaller communities how elemental their involvement is in the connection and social well-being of the community. But we will not fund sporting equipment or things that actually advance specifically that sport. So just if you've got a project and you're from one of those organisations, I really encourage you to give FRRR a call and have a chat to them about your project to make sure that it would be eligible. Obviously, projects outside of Australia are considered, and political parties, lobby groups or religious promotion. We do fund organisations that may have, you know, a religious foundation, but we look at the fact that they are not just benefiting people in their religious community, but they have a broad community benefit. So this is a bit of the basics, but it is, I think it's, and as I said, this is really handy. I'll send this through to you. Just that thing of an idea, you know, are you solving an issue or building on a greater opportunity for your community? We do like that consideration of the wider community and where the benefit will be. And also that, you know, it has community support. Now, something that we really look at, and I emphasise here, is we request you to provide a letter of support from, you know, anyone that may be benefiting from this project. Now, I appreciate this is a $5,000 grant. We don't expect you to be running around and getting a million letters of support. Those letters of support can be translated into things like an email from someone that talks about, you know, the work or the support that they've done, or those kind of things, but really demonstrating that people are interested and excited about what you're doing. Also evidence such as things like if you've done a survey or what's actually, you know, why this idea is something you want to bring to life is really showing us really important. And I suppose just really honing into why is it important for your community and what that benefit is. Once again, we do like research and stats, but we don't expect you to be doing lots and lots. It's a very simple application form. You can download it, a sample from our website, or obviously you can get on now and get it. But we keep it simple because we're not expecting you to be writing massive essays. It's really just to tell us a story and the key things that are important. As I said, this is a great example too, just, you know, to stop you kind of going into that lengthy thing is, you know, we've heard this and we think this is a good idea. Just kind of get specific that, you know, we've either consulted or we've got a council report, or, you know, people using our facilities have said it's too hot. You know, just that anecdotal thing, but very specific anecdotal things. You know, and anything that supports that, you know, how many people are using your facility that are, you know, experiencing this. And I suppose really who's involved. You know, once again, we love to see that you're supporting more people, or who's volunteering on the project, who will be participating, and who your beneficiaries are. It really gives us a beautiful picture of how that project then sits in the community. Also, if you're doing something that's a bit complex, it's really good to know that you've got people that have the skills and experience to carry out those tasks that you're doing. Anything that stops us kind of, you know, raises an eyebrow or a question, you know, it's like, okay, so they're going to, someone was building a silo library with a silo that had been donated by a farmer. And we're a bit like, well, how's it going to get there? But further down in the grant, they said, yes, it's being transported by this. And one of the members of our PNC, you know, has this equipment, etc., to do this work as a volunteer. And you know, volunteer insurance is covered and those kind of things. So, you know, anything that stops us raising questions is great. So once again, the how, when, and where. So just that detail. Any particular stages, the tasks, the resources, the responsibility, critical project dates. You know, I think it was a really good point you raised there in regards to who applies and ownership of a facility. If you are proposing to do some work on a facility and you are renting it, or those kind of things, or it's something that might be subject to council approval, we really need to understand that you've spoken to council about that. You have a level of confidence in getting that approval if the grant's approved, or whoever owns that building is not necessarily going to benefit commercially from what's going on there. So it would be good to understand the terms of the lease, all those kind of things. Also, just considering, you know, what does success look like? I think from my perspective, whenever I start a program, I always think of that as well, because that helps me to really visualize everything that needs to be considered, and how we want to tell the story at the end. So this is a really good example of, you know, what to say, what not to say. So the quotes and permits are referred to there. Rather than saying, you know, we've got this many beneficiaries, you know, this is how we've engaged them. It's going to happen now, it's going to finish then, those kind of things. We do ask you to prepare a budget. Now, it's really important to understand that when we go back to that, what can we fund? We are funding charitable projects. So anything that might have an individual kind of benefit, such as the prizes we talked about earlier, we won't fund. But, you know, we need you to kind of tell us all the costs of the project and give us the right kind of estimates for that. It can be a challenge, I know, if you're getting any infrastructure, to get quotes in the current environment, particularly from a time basis. As long as you can, if you're struggling to get quotes, all those kind of things, just make sure you can give us some kind of justification for the estimate that you're providing, you know, such as someone bought this, you know, a year ago, and we've put a 5 or 10% kind of increase in it because we're aware of costs. So it just allows us to see your thinking as you kind of budget out the project. We also really appreciate that there's quite a lot of in-kind and co-contribution that comes into the project. And you may also be applying for other grants at the same time that you're applying for this grant. to cover a bigger project. Those grants don't have to be confirmed in regards to the funding, but we do ask you to put down that, you know, where we've applied to the local council for a $5,000 grant, and it asks you, is it confirmed or unconfirmed? And you can just put, you know, unconfirmed if that hasn't come through yet. But and we don't necessarily, you know, say, oh, well, they won't be able to do it because they don't have that funding. We know the thinking that you're going through. And we also realise that if it's a really good project, you receiving grant funds from us will actually support you in potentially getting a grant from another organisation. We do count that in-kind contribution as important. You know, that's something we report to our funders, because it really shows that community investment when people are volunteering their time or actually donating resources to one of your projects. There's some really good tips here in regards to just writing your application. I think, you know, just those 5 or 6 key points there in regards to, you know, following the guidelines. We don't have word limits, but just be conscious of the people that are reading it and just try and keep it succinct and clear. Give yourself time. We do have a month, so that's great. So try not to leave it to the last minute. Attach quotes. Your financials are really important. We do need you to provide us with the last 12. If you don't have anything earlier, the last 12 months is our ideal, or otherwise 18 months, 12 months within that period of your financial records. And if you are a newer organisation and you're just starting up, we will consider you. What we need to do is understand what you currently have in your bank account and that you have a registered bank account in that organisation's name. So, you know, you're not disadvantaged in being a new startup organisation, but we need to understand probably 3 to 6 months of the financial transactions that are going on in the running of your organisation. And look, I have funded organisations that have $500 in the bank. So, you know, that's not, I encourage everyone to be considering it, but just know that you've got to give us this information. Nothing is going to be against you. The more information you give us, the better it is, really. I always think this is a really nice little, you know, checklist to have a look at. You know, use clear, simple language, avoid technical language. Assume, I love this one, assume the reader knows nothing about your organisation, project or community. People will make really local references to things, and as someone reading, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I've got to go and look that up now and try and work it out and understand what they're talking about. So, you know, just kind of feel like you're explaining something to a stranger. Be specific, make it clear how you're going to use the requested funds. So even if you've got a bigger project, kind of say this $5,000 will be going towards this component. It just makes it really easy for us to go, yes, it's charitable. That's great. We understand where it sits. So that's really the tips. With regards to how we do the assessment, myself and one of my colleagues kind of do the initial reviews. Then we work with Gardiner to do shortlisting. And then we sit down with the committee of the FRRR CEO and the Gardiner CEO to finalise those decisions. We validate them to make sure the projects are actually eligible, and then we kind of, I suppose, score them in regards to the community benefit, the distribution, the equity. Yeah, look, it can be really, really difficult, but what's great is that this is a dedicated program for your communities. It isn't as highly competitive as other grant rounds. So it's a really good opportunity for you to, you know, I suppose, stand out from the crowd with your project. That's why I always encourage anyone that's in these communities to have a look at it and make an application. And also, if we see another opportunity in another one of our grant programs, we will often recommend your grant application goes in to be considered there without having to waste any more of your time. So it's a real benefit with FRRR. You know, at the end of the day, we hope that the winner is your community. You have 12 months to do the project. And what we do also is Gardiner very graciously, as I showed before, there was a photo from a grant celebration we had in Melbourne a couple of years ago, but last year we had the grant celebrations in each of the regions. So in the northeast, we're in Shepparton, I think we were in Warragul in the Gippsland area, and we were in Warrnambool for the southwest. So that's a really good opportunity for you know, successful grantees and past grantees to come together, and other community members as well. So you know, we want people to just, these communities, to continue to kind of see this as their program. As I said, FRRR really has lots of resources. So if you know, if you want to look a little bit more into project planning or those kind of things, go onto our Grantseeker resources. You'll see some case studies in there, and lots of things to use. And what we do suggest is that you make sure you have that closing date in your diary, that you subscribe to our newsletter, so that in the future you will know when other grant opportunities are available. And you just use the tools on our site to really find those opportunities that are going to help your communities. I'd like to thank Sarah for joining me today, Sarah Collier, and I'd like to thank the Gardiner Foundation, obviously, for their funding of this program. Also, I'd encourage you that if you've got any questions when you're doing your applications, if you have any problems with our systems, please reach out and just give our phone line a call. We actually have people that answer the phone at FRRR, and they're very, very helpful, and you know, can steer you in the right direction on anything, and even to discuss projects as well. So I can't speak highly enough of the people that you'll speak to. So that's great. But thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.